Welcome to the weekly update from the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program. My name is Kevin Martin. I'm here with Andy Musa. We're going to discuss primarily today a payment program introduced by USDA. This program just got rolled out September 21st, and they're still, I think, working out some of the details, but we do have some information for you. Andy, I don't know if you have any questions about what this is. It's a little new to some of our grape growers.
I definitely do, since this the business aspect is not actually my expertise. I actually do have a few questions that grape growers might have for you concerning this this specialty assistance program for specialty crop growers. Could you tell us? I think it's called CFAP 2, if I'm correct on that. And could you just what that's...
We can get out of the acronym world too, because the government loves the acronyms. But so essentially, that stands for the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. I don't know if grape growers heard of that program when it was in its 1.0 stage. This happened back in, I think, April, March, and then some payments were made after that, and it pretty much wrapped up by June or July. I think the program was wrapped up. But grape growers were not eligible for that program. They were looking for commodities that specifically had declines in price that could be proven related to COVID. And obviously, grape growers and lots of other commodity growers harvest in the fall or late summer, and there was no evidence that anything like that had been happening. Of course, grape growers, if anything, have been probably helped out in the price department when it comes to coronavirus. So this is very different than that. If you heard of that, 2.0 is a lot different than that. So I think we could talk about some of those differences.
Well, you said for the first program, CFAP 1, I guess, 1.0, that grape growers weren't eligible. But who is eligible for this CFAP 2 program?
So for the first one, they had something called a price trigger eligibility. If your commodity declined in price by 5% or greater, you were given a payment. That's going to happen again. So like the dairy industry, for example, is eligible for CFAP 2. They already, if they already got paid for CFAP 1, they would just get paid again. So they're going to get 1.2 cents per pound, because that's about what they think the price has fallen per pound of milk. And they'll get a minimum, if it's a crop, not dairy, obviously, of $15 per acre. So that still exists. That's where grape growers would have fallen off, and lots of other specialty crop growers. So they created a couple new categories. The second category is the flat rate category. And that's new for this stage, this 2.0 funding. Everyone will get a minimum of $15 per acre for crop that they grow if it's a flat rate commodity. And there's a whole list on farmers.gov of what flat rate commodities are. It's not grapes. Grapes is going to be in part of this new category called the sales commodity category. And there's tons and tons of crops in the sales commodity category. So if you grow other crops that were not part of CFAP 1, take a look at farmers.gov and see if your commodity is listed as a sales commodity category. Grapes is, so you'll be eligible to receive funding through this program as that category.
So, okay, so since grape growers are eligible, what will the payments be based on in this program?
So the payments will be based on your 2019 sales of commodities. So if you file a Schedule F, for example, this will be listed in two different places. Payments received from cooperatives and payments received from the production of produce, livestock. It's all in the revenue lines. I think it's revenue line 2 and 5, but that's what it's going to be based on for raw commodities. So if you have things in there that are not raw commodities, you're going to have to do some accounting to try to, and you can work with your local FSA office to help you with this, to try to figure out what the value of that commodity was. So for example, if you grow grapes and Fredonia, and you sell them at a farm stand, that's a retail product. You're adding a lot of value there. The commodity is not worth, $3 a clamshell. And this program is for commodities. It's not for value-added products. It's not for groceries. But for the bulk of our grape growers that sell to cooperatives in the cash market, that's what this is for.
So that would include, say, somebody has Concords and sells it to a winery. Would that be included?
Somebody who has Concords and sells it to a winery, it would be included. If you're selling it to your own winery, it's still included. You just have to subtract out the value you're adding. So you'll get the value, you'll get a percentage payment based on the value of that commodity. And the value of that commodity is not $10 a bottle. It's, you know, $200, $300 a ton.
Okay. Okay. So as far as the time frame for that USDA will accept these applications from growers, what is that time frame?
So it's actually, the final application is due December 11th. So you do have a little bit of time. They have said they had there's a webinar. We sent out a link for that webinar in our, actually it wasn't our crop update. We sent out a special link because we were on some short notice there. The webinar was Thursday, September 24th. That link you should be able to find in your email. If you're a member of the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program, you can still click it. It's recorded. So you won't see a live version anymore, but you will see a recording of it. And that explained that if you already applied for CFAP 1, your application process will probably be really quick and brief because they already have your application partially filled out for this stage 2. Now for grape growers that are just grape growers, the length of your application will be somewhat dependent on your relationship with farm services. So if you've already reported your acreage and you've already worked with them on other programs in the past, everything's going to go faster. If you've never worked with them before, they're going to need some additional information. If you forgot to report your acreage this year, they're obviously going to need to work through that. So I would encourage you to start this process earlier, depending on what your relationship with FSA is, because the length of time it takes you to do it will vary somewhat. There's a number of different ways you can apply.
So a few things to sort of get the growers a little bit more familiar with this program. You would tell them to go to that website, farm.gov? Farmers.gov. Okay.
And right now, and I'm assuming through the month of December, the whole front banner, like the half of the web page, is a link to the CFAP page, but farmers.gov/CFAP will take you directly there as well.
Okay, now once they're on there.
Yeah, go ahead.
They're on there, you know, is it easy for a grower to figure out, okay, with the grapes, I mean, they have the different commodities and you click on grapes, is that?
Yeah, I think one of the real reasons to go there is just to make sure your commodities are eligible and what category they fall in. And there's a whole database there where you essentially just type in your commodity and you'll figure out where you qualify. But, you know, for us, where we specialize in grapes, I can just go ahead and tell you that the way we qualify based on sales commodity. Now, if you grow 6 other crops, you're probably going to need to visit that website and see how you qualify, where you qualify, or if you qualify at all. They're still excluding things that you might expect them to exclude, like cover crops or traditional crops that are essentially planted as cover. You know, you didn't intend to harvest them. All that is going to be excluded still. Green manure is excluded. Prevent plant is excluded. So there are still exclusions, and it'll go over that. But if you do have a close relationship with FSA, particularly one of the, you know, you can apply directly through that website. There's an application portal. You can just call their national call center. You can find that number on their website as well. And I think we'll have Kim post it here. But you can call them, and it sounds like they'll do the application for you and send it to you so you can sign it. You can call your local office as well and do the application that way.
Okay. So like you mentioned, we have growers that, you know, grow other things besides grapes. So there's a little bit more work that's involved, but for those other crops, they would probably be also eligible to include those crops also.
Yeah, it's very likely. I mean, depending on what they are. One of the big exclusions that people were concerned about that you can expect, it's a fairly big crop in some of our counties, is hay. So if it's not alfalfa or peanuts, apparently people grow peanuts for hay. I didn't know that, but I learned it. None of your grasses are going to qualify, even though you're raising them for hay. It's only alfalfa for whatever reason.
Okay. So is there, I mean, can you give us an example of, and I don't know if you can, but like I said, I don't know much about this program, and so I'm sort of just making this up as far as an example. Can you give us an example? Say a grower has 100 acres and he's expecting 700 tons, 7 tons of the acre, 700 tons. Do you have an idea of what his payments might be, or her payments?
Yeah. Yeah. So like, is this worth the application process?
Right.
Definitely heard things in the past about how FSA has had a few programs that don't really work well for growers because, by the time you deduct certain things, depending on the size of your operation, it might not be a substantial payment. I forgot the decimal point. I don't have it right in front of me. I thought I did. But essentially, this payment is based on your gross sales with no deductions. So if you told me that you were going to grow 700 ton in 2020, I don't know what your payment's going to be. But if you can show me your 2019 Schedule F and all of your grapes go to a cooperative, and in 2019 that cooperative paid you $100,000, then your payment would be about $10,000. Okay. So you're looking at a payment of about 10%. It's slightly graduated, but only very slightly. So for your first $50,000, it's going to be a little more than 10%. And then after that, it's going to be a little less. And it phases down all the way to, as soon as your gross sales exceed $1 million, you're down to 8.8%. And then you're capped, there's a hard cap, and this is on the payment side, at $250,000 per person who's substantially involved in the entity. So if you're running a farm all by yourself, there's no other managers, and you own it, the most you can receive is $250,000, which would essentially mean you would need like $2.8 million in sales to get there. Now, most farms that are that large probably have another person in the family involved. And if they contribute more than 400 hours of labor to the entity, that's going to double the cap to $500,000. And so on and so forth for as many people who are involved that contribute meaningfully to the organization.
Okay.
So because of that, there are going to be probably 0 growers, maybe 1 or 2 at the most that reach a cap. And I'm only saying that because I haven't done all of the math, but it's probably no growers will reach the cap. So you're looking at approximately a payment of 9 to 10%, depending on your size. And there are really no deductions. So the only concern would be if for some reason you had some weird finances in 2019 and you didn't receive any payments.
Okay. So,
and if that's the case, if your revenue, your gross revenue, not your net, if it, I don't know, maybe you were switching from the cash market to the cooperative market, and it happened to be in 2019, and your payments were only, $120 a ton or something like that, because most of your payments fell in 2018 and 2020. If that happened to you, this program isn't going to work quite as well. But other than that, it's going to be really consistent across the board.
So in other words, this is one of those programs where taking the time to fill out that paperwork is definitely worth the effort.
Yeah, I mean, I would really think so. I would think, if you're a 5-acre grower and you produce 25 tons of grapes, even then it's a part-time gig for you, but it's still real money. You're still looking at a payment of, hold on one second, I can figure that out for you, of probably $500. So I mean, I would do this paperwork for $500. There would probably be a few growers who wouldn't, but I think most growers are going to get something more like 5 to 10,000, and we'll get some, some growers will get 30 or 50 or $60,000. So this is some real money. It's better money than some of the other commodities are getting because it's based on gross sales. We have really low profit margins, so we have to make a whole bunch of money just to put a little bit in our pocket. So since they're ignoring all of our expenses and basing this payment on the volume of our business, we as grape growers do really well.
Okay.
So it's fairly big money. You look at beef, for example, it's $55 is what they're going to pay a beef farmer per head. So, for our growers, our big growers, our small big growers at this point, somebody growing 100 acres of grapes, maybe they get $30,000. You'd have to have 600 head of cattle to get $30,000.
Okay.
So, and there are certain deductions that make that much smaller for a lot of beef farmers that are growing. So I'm not sure all the commodities come out on top, but I think this is one situation where sometimes when we work with FSA, it feels like it was targeted towards field crops and it doesn't really fit well with us. So the payments relative to our farm size seem small and somewhat irrelevant. I would say this is the opposite of that. It seems like they really targeted specialty crop growers to try to improve their finances. So you should really take advantage of it.
Okay. Now, again, since USDA will accept these applications until December 11th, are you worried about, and I don't know if the CFAP 1 was one of these, but a few programs came out since this COVID situation, and they ran out of money rather quickly.
I wondered if you were going to ask that.
What's that?
Yeah, they asked that too. So there were some growers on the call or farmers on the call that did ask that question. They seem very confident that you do not need to apply early, that they will not run out of funding.
Okay.
Now, that being said, I mean, I like to do everything early, number one. Number two, what they didn't say is exactly how long it's going to take for you to complete your application. So you do want to give yourself enough time to complete that application. In certain instances, depending on the type of application you're filing, you will have to make an appointment or at least speak with farm services because they'll have to do that acreage report for you. So you have to work through that process. And a lot of these service centers, the local service centers, are either closed to the public or they're only open by appointment. So it's going to slow everything down in that sense. So I really don't think you want to apply on December 10th or even December 1st. But that being said, I don't get the impression that it's a race. Like the people who get a chance to apply this week are going to be the only people who get funding.
Okay. Well, and it is harvest, so growers are extremely busy. But again, since it seems like this program will be worth the time, it's probably better to get your application in as soon as you can in this harvest season and not wait till, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's definitely better to do it during harvest. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say if you're one of those harvest operators that's running around, 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, and you're just not going to do it. I'm not going to say you're not going to get funding because you very well could get funding even if you don't start this application process until November 1st. But I would try to find somebody in your operation that could do the application for you. And if you're a grower that gets, 2 days off a week, or you only work 6-hour days during harvest, because those growers are out there, you should definitely take advantage of the fact that most of our commodity growers in our counties right now are very busy, and take advantage of the time of your local FSA office when you can. And that being said, there's one other thing I want to reference is they have established a national call center for this program. So you're not entirely reliant on your local office. That's 877-508-8364. It's on their website. We'll throw it up as well, so you don't have to remember it. but they're open for phone calls from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. And in some instances, it sounds like they're able to do the application for you, mail it to you so you can sign it. So even if you're working long hours, if you get some time to call them, you may be able to work through this application process. There's going to be some information that they need that you might not have if you're sitting in a tractor, but I think they're trying to make this as easy as they can while gathering the information they need. They're going to need your bank account information to deposit this money in your checking account. They're going to need your tax ID number so they can send you tax information at the end of the year. But they don't need much. Most of what it sounds like they're going to do is make sure you promise that you're not lying about your income, and that's going to be the check. And I'm sure there will be fraud investigations after to make sure you didn't lie, but it doesn't, and I think there's going to be some discretion at the local service centers to determine what exactly they're going to require based on how businesses work in that local area. But it doesn't sound like they're going to require a lot. So that part of the application process is going to be relatively easy.
So it sounds like finally we may have a federal assistance program that is relatively easy to go through the process and definitely worthwhile for the money that you'll get for the time that you should be putting into this.
Yeah, and I think the one thing you want to keep in mind, the way to think about this program, they haven't really come out and said it. This is Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. But this is a direct subsidy program. This is not something I have seen in my career here. It's something that I've talked about in a historical sense. Like, this is a thing that countries like the US used to do that we don't do anymore and we're never going to do again. I'm pretty sure that came out of my mouth. But this is a direct subsidy program. So they're not really looking for you to do things like document loss or hardship or pay it back. It's not a loan. This is just putting money in the hands of farmers for assistance.
Oh, that sounds great. And it seems like, it's only, coming on the third week in September. So, growers have some time. You're getting this out early enough. So they've got plenty of time, but do it as early as you can.
Yes. And, I think looking back for the last year, there've been a lot of programs set up that were both like positive programs for growers and also things that cost growers money. A lot of that programming was New York only. It was a state-based thing. This is USDA. So if you didn't catch that, USDA FSA, this is a nationwide program. So this is everybody in all counties. So whether you hear this in Southeast PA or in Erie County, Pennsylvania, or New York, this applies to you. This applies to wine grape growers. This applies to juice grape growers. We do have some bad news that I'm going to cover in more detail next week that's not related to this, but is related to government programming. And that is specific to New York, fortunately for our Erie County PA growers and the rest of Pennsylvania.
Okay, so some of these things you covered, you're going to put online the website that they can go to, the telephone number that they can call if they need assistance and things like that. Yes. Okay, great.
But I do want to mention next week really quickly. So only because we're right up against the deadline for meeting that requirement. I wrote a quick crop update about it, and then I held off waiting for New York State to finish writing the regulations before I wrote anything in more detail. They are not going to finalize their regulations until after it's too late to comply with the law. So you have to comply with the law before you know how to comply with the law. But it is what it is. So starting September 30th, New York State is going to require paid sick time for workers. So if you employ more than 4 workers, and right now it looks like 4 workers means 4 bodies, no matter how many hours they work. So if you just have 4 people working for you, 4 different names, that's all it takes. It doesn't matter how many hours they work. Then you will be considered a large enough employer so that you cannot satisfy the legal requirement of sick time without making sure that sick time is paid. So if you have less than 4 employees, like you only have one guy that works for you and you never have more than one, you don't have to use paid sick time. You can use unpaid sick time.
Now, would this, since harvest is here, would that consider, I mean, would like a part-time harvest crew?
Yes. Yes. If you have 4 guys harvesting, that means 100% of your employees for the entire year need to be given paid sick time. They need to accrue 1 hour for every 30 hours they work. And they need to do that immediately. Like the first hour they work, they get 1/30th of an hour. So even if you have somebody who only works for you occasionally, they will now get paid sick leave. They won't get much, but they'll get it.
Now, okay, let me bring up another thing. Since now we're going into the trimming season after harvest, what if you hire 5 trimmers and they're there for a couple days?
Yeah. Yes.
Oof. So, but this is just for New York.
This is just for New York. This is not a problem in Pennsylvania. Next week, we'll go over some of the requirements of that, but make sure if you have a payroll service provider, and I think at this point you just should in New York, they're well worth the effort because of all of this contemporaneous record keeping you have to have. They just do it for you. They charge you per employee, they charge you per month. They don't charge you per record. So as New York State adds these layers of complexity, those payroll service providers aren't charging more. So they just become more valuable to you. But give them a call, make sure that starting next week, your harvest crew is accruing paid sick leave if you have a harvest crew.
Okay. And you said September 30th?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So well, yeah, that's all I really wanted to say about it this week. We can go over, how much sick time what it's gonna look like and how it's regulated and what you can do with it and all of that stuff next week. And then it's a podcast into it itself.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think I have any other questions concerning the CFAP 2. So just get on it, growers, before December 11th.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a grower out there and you want to give us a call about it or ask a question down below, you certainly can. I would say that because, FSA has so many resources available to answer these questions, you should probably call them first. I just wanted to make sure, we as a group wanted to make sure that you've heard about it, because CFAP was really in the news a lot and I completely ignored it because in that stage 1, it just was not relevant to grape growers at all. So now that it's relevant to basically everybody, we want to make sure that this is a different program and it does work really well for you. So
okay,
that's really my role here.
The one stipulation that I'm going to mention, you said call us, and I would say don't call me, call Kevin.
Sure, that's fine.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I think
Thank you everybody for joining us.
Yep. Take care.